Hey everyone, I hope you all are having a great day. With that said, I have some more interesting stories for you all to listen to. With that said, enjoy. So this happened in 1996, in my hometown of about 100,000 people. I was 15 years old, from the suburbs, and went to a high school in the city. English is not my first language, so I apologize for any grammatical mistakes. So I finished with class, and for some reason, I decided to walk to the main bus station, instead of just waiting at the nearest bus stop. I stood at the gate that my bus line, number 15, starts from. Another bus line, number 17, also starts from the same gate. After waiting for around 10 minutes, a man asked me if bus number 17 has taken off yet. I say, yes. I'm sorry, you just missed it. The man, who looked to be around 30 or 40, then introduces himself to me as Mark. He stretches out his hand for me to shake it. I don't want to be impolite, so I do. I introduce myself as Maya. My name is not Maya. It was bizarre to me that a grown man is introducing himself to me at a bus station. I may have been 15, but I knew better. He asks if I just finished school. I say yes. He asks me what school I go to. I lie. He asks if I'm going home. I say no, even though I am. He asks where I'm going. I say, to a friend's house. My bus pulls up and I get on it. Strangely, this man Mark gets on as well. I know for a fact he'd asked me if number 17 has taken off yet. If he was originally planning on going on number 17, there's absolutely no reason to get on my bus. Number 15, they don't have a single stop in common. I sit down and he sits himself next to me. He asks me which year of high school I'm in. I lie and I say I'm in junior. I was actually a freshman at the time. He says I look too young to be a junior. I say I hear that all the time. He asks me if I have a boyfriend. I say no. He says that I should. I then ask him where he's going. He says he's going home. I ask if he wasn't planning on taking number 17. He says no and tells me that he lives at the very end of the bus line of 15. That was odd. I've never seen him on the bus before. He asked me if I'm on my way home as well. I say no. I'm visiting a friend. Looking back, he knew I was lying. I was sure he believed me, and I really thought he had the situation under control. I should have walked up to the bus driver and told him what's going on. I didn't, because I just wasn't scared enough. And I didn't want to make a scene out of nothing. There were plenty of people around, and while he was strange, I really thought he was just a harmless, lonely weirdo. So we get to my stop. I purposely miss it and get off at the next one, thinking I'll fool him and just walk home a bit longer. To my surprise, he gets off as well. I ask him where he's going, and he says he wants to walk me home. Again, I tell him that I'm not going home. I'm visiting a friend. He says that's fine. He'll walk me. I say he really doesn't need to, and in a stern, irritated tone, he tells me to shut up and walk. There is no one on the street, and we're the only ones who got off the bus here. I'm alone with this weird man who followed me from the bus station. I can't go home because I don't want him knowing where I live. I start panicking. I don't know what to do, so I just freeze and stand there, silent. In an instant, he went from weird but chatty and smiley to telling me to shut up, and I went from feeling in control to knowing I really, really fucked up. He puts his hand on my shoulder and tells me that he doesn't have much time, so we should get going. I want to tell him that he clearly does, but I don't want to anger him, so I just nod. He tells me that if I'm good, I don't have to be scared of him. I lie and say I'm not. He asks me if that means I plan on being good. I say yes. He's forced me to repeat it in a whole sentence. Yes, I will be good. I begin walking. I don't know where I was going. I just walked. He walked with me, with his hand still on my shoulder. I was never religious, but I remember praying that I don't pass out. My heart was beating so fast and breathing was so difficult. I was sure I'm about to collapse and die. Then, I spotted an older man tending his garden in front of a house. That's the last thing I clearly remember. I have a vague memory of running. I was later told that I was screaming for help while running towards the older man, while Mark ran off. The older man called the police and they contacted my parents. The police couldn't do anything but take my statement, since my parents both worked and couldn't take me to and from school. They brought me a phone the very same day. This was in the 90s when mobile phones were a luxury. I wish the story ended here. After the event, I only ever got on the bus at the stop right in front of my school. A few weeks passed and I did so like I did any other day. We locked eyes as soon as I stepped on. He was on the bus, with the biggest grin on his face, like he couldn't be more excited to see me. I was so creeped out, I immediately got off and ran into the school. I called my mom in tears and she had me find a teacher to walk me to her car when she came to get me. The school was then notified of the situation. After that, he was spotted walking around the school several times, sometimes a few days in a row, but sometimes he wasn't seen for weeks. The police was of no help. They couldn't do anything until he actually heard me or showed up on the school property or at my home. I spent the rest of the year waiting in the school until late afternoon so my mom could pick me up after work. We always took a very long route home. I now know she was making sure we weren't getting followed. My parents then had me switch schools. Thankfully, he was never spotted in my neighborhood, and I'm very sure he never found out my name or got my address. I only ever saw him one more time. I was 21 in my hometown on summer break from university. I saw him in a grocery store at a whole different part of town. He didn't recognize me, didn't even look at me, but I immediately recognized him. Where I live, there was no convicted criminal list like in the US. Such cases are not reported, and I never found out the man's full name. I have no idea who he is or what he has done in the past. I don't know what he would have done to me. My belief is that he was mentally challenged, saw me, liked me, and followed me. My mother believed that it had been much more complex, that he was planning something, and that he didn't know exactly where we're going. My dad still doesn't talk about it. I'm just happy he's out of my life. I'm female, 22 at the time writing this. I was almost killed by my ex-boyfriend. I'm about 30 now. I will be changed the names as to protect myself. I'll start with a quick backstory. At the time of the attack, I was 19, almost 20. My ex Gavin was 27. We had Big Chow Chow and a cat, the dog being his and the cat mine. We lived in a 3-bedroom house. The layout being you walk into the right is the living room, in front of you the dining room, and off to the left a kitchen. Open concept living and dining room, closed kitchen, down a longish hallway. We had the bathroom to the right and the main bedroom at the end of the hall on the other right. Then the 2 other bedrooms on the 2 other walls. So a few months before, we had allowed a friend to stay with us, Lacey, and it didn't end well, as she was just taking advantage of us. The week leading up to the attack, Gavin had just gotten back from a work trip, which I believed to be about 3 to 4 weeks away from home. The week he was back, he was completely out of it, not being able to complete a thought. I'd ask or tell him something, and less than 5 minutes later, he completely forgot, or just not have heard me, just off in some other world almost. One day I was very frustrated with this. I had asked for help with chores or from him to take the garbage out, only to be ignored. One day he said that if it continues, that he wanted me to slap him. So we got out for dinner with his mom 2 days prior to the attack, and she was obviously very worried about him, as there were clearly something wrong. At the time, the only mental disorder he had or was aware of was OCD, in which I'm now even more convinced that is not what he had by any means. The day of the attack, we'd just gotten back from grabbing some takeout, and we were sitting on the couch in the living room. I'd been painting my nails, and he's been playing Mario Kart. He looked over at me and said, "Lacey, put a curse on my family." I was dealing with my own really poor mental health at the time, so I wasn't really in a space where I could be forcing this on him. I have BPD. I wasn't sure what to do, so I suggested he just hop in a cold shower, as it helped him early in the week to just reset a bit. He walked into the bathroom and was muttering to himself. It just felt so off. I don't know how to describe it. I didn't feel safe. I walked over and asked if I could call his mom for him, maybe invite her over for supper. Kinda beating around the bush that I wanted her to come to help me. He looked at me and just started yelling that's all he needed was me. I walked out and started for the living room as I was calling his mom. He came out of the bathroom naked and started yelling at Ollie, the dog, to discipline me and attack me. Mind you, he was trained as my guard dog. At this point, I believe his mom had answered the phone and heard what was happening. He started to call me Lacey and that I needed to pay for what I did. I ran into the bedroom with my phone. His mom's still on the line. He kicked down the door and smashed my head into our mirrored closet doors and threw my phone to the ground. He was screaming that he was going to kill me. I scrambled out of the bedroom door, trying to get into the front door. As I was passing the kitchen, he got a hold of me and wrapped his arms around my throat again, saying he was going to kill me. I remember looking over to the table and seeing my cat Sterling all puffed up. I have never seen him so scared. I was fighting not to go unconscious. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at him, just trying to get his arms off my throat. I remember starting to see black specks in my vision and thinking I'm going to die. What is he going to do with my body? He asked me. I knew what it was like to be raped. This is the part where I'm not sure if he was actually out of his mind, as I'd been raped before and it was a year that month. I was very open about how that had been affecting me. He threw me to the ground and put his foot over my head as if to stomp it. This was the only time I had seen his eyes throughout the attack, and they were almost lifeless. His pupils so dilated, you could barely see the iris. He was yelling over and over again, "Admit it, Lacey. You know what you did. Admit it." I just started apologizing, doing and saying anything I could to make him happy. This seemed to work as I got the opportunity to scramble to my feet and race out the door. I just wished I'd left the screen door open. I ran from the house to house in nothing but shorts and sweaters in a February and on the coldest provinces in Canada. I got into maybe 2 to 3 houses before I heard Ollie screaming. It's a sound I can never get out of my head. I just dropped to the ground screaming and crying, "Gavin, leave him alone!" I knew he killed the dog. At this point, a bunch of the neighbors had heard me and came running to help. An older couple called the police and brought me into their home, not knowing if they were putting their own lives at risk. My parents were living in a completely different province. Someone gave me their phone to call my mom. She was out for supper with some friends, and I just told her Gavin killed the dog and tried to kill me. The police finally showed up after what seemed like 5 hours. 5 to 6 cars, firearms out. They used a megaphone to tell him to come out with his hands up. He walked out naked and covered in blood. Once they had gotten him into the car, a police officer came to talk to me, while the others searched the house. Shortly after, an officer came up and asked how many dogs we had. I told him 1 and a cat. I asked if Ollie was still alive, and they told me he was dead in the bathtub. Gavin had killed him in the living room, then brought him in the bathtub, filled up the tub and put Ollie's body in it. I had asked about the cat, and they said they couldn't find him just yet. I was sure he had killed my sweet boy too. Sterling was the only thing I could think about. I went into a panic and was no longer able to give them any more information, as I was basically in tunnel vision. "Where's my cat? I want my cat. Find my cat." The officers asked if there was any treats they could use to coax him out, and where his hiding spots were. They ended up finding Sterling alive but scared, and they couldn't get him, as he was too scared and attacking the officers. They had blocked off the worst of the scene, so they had me go in to get Sterling. As much as they did block off, there was still so much blood, and the smell of blood and feces is overpowering. Sterling was in the bedroom on the bed just crying. I scooped him up and asked officers to find my vape. As I was walking out of the house, Gavin's mom had just gotten out of her car. She asked me where Ollie was, and all I could say was, "Gavin killed him." She dropped to the ground and started bawling. I just walked past her and put Sterling in the car and sat in front. Not sure what to do, as I didn't want to go in with her. In that moment, I hated her for what her son did to me and Ollie. To this day, I regret how I acted towards her. I had no right to be cruel to someone who was always now suffering. My mom has gotten a hold of my aunt that lived a few towns over, so once I was done with the officers, I was to go with her. Once the police were done doing whatever it was they were doing in the house, I had to go back and get clothes and such. They forgot to close the bathroom door. Luckily, I wasn't the one who walked to by fist. It was Gavin's mom. The sound she made was horrible. Eventually, my aunt came and I went with her. The next day, I had to go back to the house to get my things. The police had gotten someone to take care of the body, but not the mess of blood and bodily fluids and pee. Half of the stuff I didn't know what it was. His mom's sister and I had to clean the house. Blood everywhere, a lot of broken furniture. His mom was kind enough to clean all my bathroom things and throw through anything that couldn't be saved. Unfortunately, I had African black soap that night. I waded myself in with it, and then I locked down. I was washing myself with a bar of soap, caked in Ollie's blood. 2 weeks later, Sterling and I were on a plane to my mom's. The court case took 2 years, and I only later found out that he had gone and loaded our guns. For the longest time, I did it. I wanted to know how he killed Ollie. But when going through the evidence, the officer mentioned a baseball bat. Not knowing I didn't want to know, he only got 10 months house arrest. To this day, 2 years later, he'd still tried to contact me, blaming me for not getting him help. I think the worst part is I do partly blame myself, not just for not knowing to get him help, but also for not leaving the door open for the animals. For bringing the baseball bat into the house weeks prior, because I was too lazy to walk into the shed. Thank you for reading, and I hope maybe I can find someone to relate to, so I don't feel so alone in my experience. I know that's horrible to say, but it's just hard to speak to anyone about it that hasn't been through something somewhat similar. And advice or comments are welcome again. Thank you for taking the time to read. I know it was long and somewhat choppy. My memory of the day is both a blur and also like I'm reliving it. I hope you all enjoyed those stories. With that said, as always, stay depraved.